So yeah, any thoughts, any questions?
How did you make your dress out of?
Oh, this is a raw knobby silk from Dharma Trading. I bought a bolt, and then you have to dye it yourself. It comes colorless, but it's lovely because when you get it, it's stiff like paper, like photocopy machine paper. Really, really easy to work with, and then when you wash it, it gets incredibly soft. So I'm having a really, really good time making clothes. I had to build the universe first. Anybody else? Is anybody making anything? Does anyone make something? You make awesomeness.
No, constantly.
Oh, you make
Constantly
awesome.
making.
Oh, so what kinds of things do you make? What's that?
Everything, I try to use, reuse and recycle things all the time. So I don't,
She just takes things and she turns them into
Into other things.
Yeah.
Very nice. It's nice to be that transformative link.
yeah, 'cause that's what I see too, just so much waste and and there's so much.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you back.
Oh.
She makes a lot of stuff out of reuse, of trash and stuff laying around.
And it's so abundant out there. There's just so many materials that are thrown away. I don't understand.
It seems to me like we're really, the perfect thing is, okay, we overproduced. So great, we also forgot how to make everything. So why don't we just take the junk and learn how to make everything again? And when the junk runs out, maybe by then we'll be a little smarter and there won't be any more junk. And by then our skills will have come, honed in, and we can remake a world
I think
smartly.
it would be a fun experiment if we just stopped manufacturing new things
Uh-huh.
and see what we could do with what we
What we
have,
have.
what's left.
People in my town in particular really can't stand that I'm against recycling, but I have a reason, and the reason is I'd rather see us just say, well, no, you have to just live with everything you take home. We're not going to pick it up, and there's nowhere to take it, right? Shut the landfill. So you're not going to buy that 6-pack of water. You're not going to buy a lot of stuff because if you're going to live with it forever. So I'd rather see us not create the illusion that it's going to go somewhere, because where does it go, right? Recycling has a carbon footprint, so I think it's just maybe training wheels to something else, but yeah.
Well, your story is very beautiful and inspiring, and congratulations on your journey and sharing it with us. And it just seems to me, I'm very inspired by the goddess and the re-emerging feminine in our time, and that this is the way that the feminine is coming into our practical lives. So you're talking about a whole change in consciousness on a huge scale.
Yeah, well, it's like
That,
going from
the paradigm shift thing.
Yeah. I think it's, when you say feminine, what comes to mind for me is we're going from devouring to savoring. Right now we're just kind of I think it's a byproduct really of our economic system, which is, endless production to no end. And that causes devouring, and there's this, we have to have a belief in scarcity for capitalism to work. So, we're walking around basically with this impoverished thing that requires devouring. But if you consider that savoring is an act of gratitude, it's really the cure for devouring, because you can't feel impoverished and gratitude at the same time. So I think of savoring as the feminine, when you bring up the feminine, and devouring, nothing personal, guys, as the...
How do we really nurture ourselves? I mean, what you're talking about is revolutionary, because if you look at Monsanto on the one hand, basically claiming they're giving us something that's nutritious to us, and actually it's extremely destructive, and they know it, and they're taking over 3 countries in Africa. That's the extreme of what
Monsanto cannot be our tit, unfortunately. It can't be our mother,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Mom has got to get in his face, It's no more. So.
Thank you.
It's a big shift.
It's fun, trust me.
A bigger view, the idea of the money-driven culture is, good to take a look and get away from that. but even on a bigger scale, this idea of continuous growth, you know, that we measure ourselves by this continuous growth model. You know, are we growing enough? How much are we growing? And, you know, I was in college in the 70s, and, you know, I remember one professor saying, you know, at that time I went to hear the speaker, and this was like, you know, this is like 45 years ago. He's saying, we can't do this. We got to, you know, you talk about a change in consciousness. I mean, that's been going, you know, we're kidding ourselves if we think that, like, just as a species on the planet, you know, we're going to just continuously grow. I mean, there's got to be, you know, there's a finite planet that we're on. So I think that, you know, yeah, whether or not we're doing the money thing or not, but, you know, making our own stuff, you know, the back to nature is absolutely wonderful. But, you know, when you talk about the shift in consciousness that needs to happen, you know, yeah, you take baby steps, you start where you start. But I think ultimately we need to realize that, you know, this idea of constant growth is artificial and not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, one reason I like to focus on the making of things is because embedded in that act is what we think we are, right? So in this system, you know, we're led to see ourselves in a certain way. When I had my job, I was very specialized. If you ask me my skill set, I can tell you in a second, and I had like 5 skills. So I have a chart in the book of my skill set today, and it would take me this long to find it. It would take me a really long time to explain them all to you because there's just too many. You know, so that turn from of what we think ourselves to be, you know, am I this specialized, singleized thing, or am I anything and everything, is so important. Yeah, and I think in that is a lot of power, right? So when we're turning against giant systems and, you know, all this stuff, that empowerment is so important because when it's time to walk off a cliff and potentially be afraid, that's really what carries you, you know. Well, okay, you know, take away my stuff. I'll be all right. I mean, right now, you know, I built this homestead. It's an acre. It's off-grid. You know, I built everything that's there. It's functional. You can just go there and, like, pretty much sustain yourself with almost no cost of living. But if someone took all of it away tomorrow, it actually really wouldn't matter very much to me. Like, I know how to make that now. You know, I think that's the part that feels important.
Did you run into a lot of issues as you were pulling off the grid? I've seen this documentary about the person who does those Earth ships in New Mexico.
Oh, yeah, Michael Reynolds.
Yes.
I quoted in the book.
Oh, excellent.
He said this is not a political issue. This is not a moral issue. It's a logical issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's this logical system that we butt up against sometimes, and he had an issue with regulations and zonings. And how about yourself? Have you been able to avoid those pitfalls?
Truth or Consequences, New Mexico is a little like the Wild West, which is one of the reasons we moved there. You can just kind of get away with a lot. It's like everyone's just like, yeah, whatever. So we got away with a lot. We you know, came up with these papercrete domes. 2 kids from the city, like, hey, building inspector, we're going to build these paper domes. And he's like, you think you are, you know? So we started confronting each layer. So we learned that if a structural engineer approves our documents, that overrides the building inspector. It goes right to the state record, and then he can't stop us. So we found a like-minded structural engineer, and for $50, he told us we over-engineered it and gave us a stamp. So that was one layer. When they asked for a UL underwriter's certificate for flammability on papercrete, because it's like alternative building, you know, that's like thousands, you know, maybe even tens of thousands of dollars to get. So we took a papercrete block we made, and I held it like this, and Mikey took a blowtorch to it, and we videotaped 5 minutes of this, and we gave it to the building inspector, and he was like, okay. So that's how we got around it. But going off grid was, I think, where you started. My city does not grid tie, and we finagled our way best we could by doing as much of the installation as we could without disqualifying us from a state refund. So we did a lot of we did the pole mounts, we built the papercrete dome to put it in, we put in all the appliances, I guess you can call it, all the gear, and then really just had the electrician like do the hookup. Like, so we worked it out that way, but we didn't have any trouble. The only trouble is, batteries last, I'm hoping maybe 10, 11 years on ours, and it's coming to that point. So we're hoping we can grid tie by then. But of course, there's downsides to grid tie. So the town gets a brownout or a blackout, and even though you're producing power on your property, you have none. So there's all these like illogicalities, and then there's, I'm sure a lot of unfairness right now about buyback rates. So I'm sure it'll get worked out. But
Bathrooms.
I so wish that the first thing I did was yank the bathroom and shut it down. So, because I do my own plumbing, because I made this pledge, I hate doing plumbing. I hate going to the plumbing store 97 times for parts, and that's always how it is. And my neck gets tweaked, I'm upside down under a sink. So, I'm on my to-do list actually is a humidor setup that I cannot wait to do outdoors. I have just no desire to be involved in bathrooms. And actually, we already bathe outside exclusively. We shut off all the water in our indoor showers because our property had one really nice extra little thing. It was under a wooden box, and this old rickety box was a wellhead for a 108-degree mineral spring, 200 feet deep. Someone had been drilling with a permit for oil in 1910, and they just kept getting hot water. So we just plumbed it out to a feed tank, and we've been bathing outside for like 5 years. So that reduced my utilities more, which was great. We just have a 2-gallon flash hot water heater in the kitchen, and that's it.
Is it still all gravel?
No, now there's I think we planted over 50 trees. We have a 1/4 of an acre of gardening. And actually, when I drive to my property from a distance, I've noticed, the first time I couldn't figure out what it was, but there was like this fuzz overhead. And it turned out to be birds and bees and butterflies. And it was like the only spot on my block. Because everything else was still a gravel pit. Yeah. Yeah, it's really great. Yeah. I mean, another mistake, there's always many in a project like this. Another mistake I made is I wish I invested then when I had money in or built a ferro cement 20,000 gallon cistern for water, because I live in a desert where we get 9 inches of water a year, and we keep playing with distillation, but it's complicated and slow, and I wish I was holding water. So if I could do it again, I would put that in. Now, is it still illegal in Colorado to catch water off the roof? What are you guys doing with that? It's a crazy world.
We can use our gray water. We can.
Use your rainwater?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
nice of them.
Yeah, right.
Well, but I mean, as far as catching rainwater, no.
Is it because they want the aquifer to
Yeah,
continue to
I mean,
replenish?
the water is so precious. I mean,
Yeah.
the ditches, there's just not enough water, so that if
Would a house take? And then really, isn't it the same water going to come out of the faucet anyway? I don't know. It's all very strange.
yeah, it's free to catch it.
That's it. The funny thing about the civilization is we made it. It's just our shadow. I notice myself and other people are always thinking people of the past were either smarter than us or dumber than us, right? And I keep thinking, well, they actually just were us, my feeling is I've been here since the first day, and I'm going to be here on the last day, and the sooner I clean up this mess, the better it's going to be for me. And these are my mistakes. So,
Well,
yeah.
it's kind of a symbiotic situation, isn't it? I mean, if we're not good to the earth, then the earth's just going to poison us back, so.
Yeah, there's an old Chinese proverb. What is it? He's a fool who cuts the branch on which he is sitting. Only a fool cuts the branch upon which they are sitting. Yeah, simple and true. What were you going to say?
I want to know what's the next thing you want to learn to make?
I really still want to work on distillation. Yeah, we like the Stirling engine model and steam, and we really just want to play with the engineering things. So that's there. We have an unfinished dome to finish. What's the cutting edge? I know it sounds like so simplistic, but I'm really just rocking out on making clothes. I wouldn't mind, actually, shampoo is really a bugger for me. So I've made a number of hair things, and I make a great detangler from yucca root, rosemary, and hibiscus and vinegar. But I can't seem to find a shampoo that I can tolerate, like homemade. So lately I've been taking baking soda first and scrub that in, right? And then follow that up with vinegar, which is actually pretty good, but I'd really like to do better. Yeah, not so sophisticated. Now, Mikey would answer that question differently. Yeah. So his cutting edge is he's working on a revision to the battery desulfator that can do work across different types of batteries, and then also have them all at once. And I think he's trying to make it safer, although I don't think he's going to achieve that one. It's not the safest device. Yeah. Any other questions?
Are you reading anything now? What do you read?
I'm reading Walden by Thoreau because people keep saying my book reminds them of it. So I'm halfway through. I'm listening as an audiobook while I drive through Colorado on this tour. And I am has anyone read Walden? It's just weird. So he wrote this book in 1835, and he just does the same thing that I did. It goes through food, power, fuel, like the same thing. And then it's as much like he's telling you his bread recipe, and then he's telling you contemplatively, what this means. And I'm like, really? Like, how did him and I use the exact same formulas to write a book? And I had never read him, so I'm reading Walden. And then in queue, I have Jonathan Livingston Seagull, because people keep saying that too to me about my book. Yeah. Yeah.
I just keep thinking, so I just graduated with my degree in social work. So I'm thinking about people who are in the middle of cities who aren't able to get out. What kind of suggestions do you have for them to start making their own things without going off the grid?
So cities have the best garbage of any place ever. So when I lived in the city, I actually had a car. I had a station wagon because I was in a band and I had to haul gear all the time. And because I had that vehicle, I know it's totally petroleum obnoxious, but I was able to score like the furniture and the couch and the big stuff. So cities have the best waste stream ever, ever, ever. Cities also benefit from like having that energy of like collectivizing. So skill sharing parties are such a great thing to do in cities. So, I mean, Mikey and I throw them all the time. Whether it's figuring out how to make pasta from scratch with an egg and flour, or how to weld or make biodiesel, as soon as we figure something out and we get good at it, we just invite everybody over. And if it's food, all the better. Like that, people are just thrilled. And it's so much more fun than so many other things you could be doing. So lately, the skill sharing workshops have been really cool, and other people come and teach them, not just us. And we've had 3D printing right alongside Dutch oven cooking, aluminum casting, how to light a fire without a match. Yeah. And I teach a women's welding class, which I really like, and I don't let the guys come. Mikey takes them in the house to sew. I'm a lousy sewer, actually. Mikey's pretty good. So, yeah, good question. Come to TRC, and the housing's very cheap.
You'll be able to find your place.
Low taxes. It's the one with the birds and the butterflies overhead. When you're in a town of 7,000 people, you just like say, "Where's Wendy?" And everyone's like, "Oh, right there." Right? So, yeah. So I want to ask you a question about your question. So, why couldn't anyone leave the city? You said if you're stuck.
I think people have certain choices, but I also think circumstances make them not want to leave. That's where their community is, that's where their family's at,
Yeah.
and that's where their support system is. So if they leave that, it might be more difficult than it already is for them.
That's a better answer than their job. Yeah, I love cities too, and I miss them. I'm curious about how it'll pan out. You know, a lot of people say that that's the future and that's the best way to make resources last and collectivize. But when I look at New York, for example, the reason I don't live in upstate New York is because of Lyme disease. So it's epidemic. 1 in 3 people have Lyme disease. And the reason we have Lyme disease is because we're missing a link in the predatory chain, right? So we took out a whole link by our civilization, and so there's misgrowth in animals, and things are out of whack. So when you consider that, my question is, can we really afford to make the world cities? Can we really maintain a healthy balance? And then how far can we get from nature and still believe we're part of nature? So my concern is, if we forget entirely that we're nature, we'll just stop supporting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing against cities. God, I miss New York like you wouldn't believe. So, okay, well, I guess I'm going to wrap there, but I did want to share a couple of things with you guys. So my book, of course I'm excited about it because I wrote it, but my publisher also did some really unbelievable things with this book. So it has what's called a Smythe bind, and it's an old way of binding a book, and it's sewn. So one of the results of that, you can see the signatures, is it actually opens flat. And they left it exposed so you can see how it's made. So it's really interesting. And then they also did this incredible thing, which is they got 18 illustrators to do these incredible, incredible spreads. Oh, here's the skill chart. So in New York, I had 5 skills. I could tell you about it in 5 seconds. Here's my skill chart today. It's not because I'm special or smart. It's because I don't have a job. It's because I have time to do this. So anyway, I want to just point out that Story Publishing doesn't just publish my book, and their motto actually is to publish practical information that encourages personal independence in harmony with the environment. So keep an eye out for other story books. And then I also wanted to pass on this. It's about our local community and this local community getting a visit by one of my teachers, who you'll find in the book. He coined this phrase: as surely as we inhabit the environment inhabits us. So he's a Sufi, and his special pixie dust, I would say, is teaching us to dissolve the boundaries between ourselves and nature. So you guys are lucky enough to be receiving a visit from him in November. So if anyone's interested in that, his name is Pirzia Anayat Khan, and there's a local Sufi community that's hosting this, and these flyers are right here for you to grab. So, okay, that really is going to be the end, and if anybody wants to stick around, if you do want books signed or anything like that, I'll stay for a bit and chat. Thanks so much.